The rabbi's mic is working? We can hear it? Okay. Well, I'll let Aaron know. Thank you.
Let's see if I can bring it. I can't bring it down there, though. That's okay. All right. Is that better? Yeah. All righty. Okay. Yes, that'll work. I'm clearly not prepared for this like the rabbi is every Saturday morning, but hopefully you guys will forgive me. We're going to go ahead and we're going to get started, but before I do, I want to thank Joey Bonnet, has known Dad since you guys were what, like 7 or 6, like little kids, right? Been a minute. And he's going to be leading us all in the Hebrew. So thank you, Joey, for that. We'd like to go ahead and get started with Psalm 23. Joe, if you don't mind. I don't know. Can you go ask for the phone from the guy out there? I got you, Joe.
On behalf of the Naklis family, I want to thank everybody who's here. Made a good showing. Oh, here we are.
Oh, no.
No?
That's mine.
Oh,
That's for the eulogy folder.
Okay.
It's right here. So we're on page 1, Psalm 23.
okay. Everybody got their thing? You'll forgive me, but I'm going to do this in English. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want.
Maketh me to lie down in green pastures.
He leadeth me beside the still waters.
Restoreth my soul.
He guideth me in straight paths for his name's sake.
Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death,
I will fear no evil, for thou art with me.
thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me.
Thou preparest a table before me in the presence of mine enemies.
Thou hast anointed my head with oil, my cup runneth over.
Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of the Lord forever.
Thank you, Joey. If you want to sit up here instead of have to go every time.
Okay, that's fine.
Miriam is going to come up right now. She's going to read a poem called A Tribute to an Adventurous Life. And I think that this is, and everybody would agree, this is just very appropriate for my dad, because if nothing else, he was all about the adventure. In the intern, I'm just going to do a little dance. And hello to all the Zoom people out there. And big thanks to Larissa, Miriam's daughter, who set up the Zoom for us, and she's going to do something pretty cool, I think, for the luncheon.
Okay, here we go. Hi. Are you kidding me? All right. A tribute to an adventurous life. And Dad actually wrote this. I just modified it a little bit. Another of our family is in the care of God. And now for the hard part. It is time for us to grieve. Though a loved one has passed, through God's resurrecting gift of memory, they never really leave. Ever with a smile, crazy memories are made. A life full of love and caring, happiness and strife. Always remember the best parts of his life. Recall all of the crazy antics year after year with happiness and delight. Recall the good times and let them light your way to help us get past the morning of today. Now he rests with angels far removed from the cares of earth. His soul has taken a path no man has ever trod. He stepped into the heavens, into the hands of God. And now he waits, like all our loved ones who have gone before, until we are happily reunited once more. It will be very interesting, this is ad lib, to see how Dad and Quincy Jones and James Earl Jones converse and solve world peace. I want that to happen.
Thanks, Mary.
Thank you, yes.
Yep. All righty. Joey, you're on. We're going to turn to the next page, and we're going to do the prayer for our Father. And it says, and it's for all males out there, so if everybody wants to just read along.
Yizkor Elohim Nishmat Abba Morei Shehalach Lishlomo Mitzevuch Shabli. Is it bigger? Oh,
How's that?
no, it's not.
Too big?
Shabali Nedor Etain Tzedakah Ba'ado Bizkor Zeh Tehei Nafsho Tzirura Yitzror HaChaim Et Nishmato Avraham Yitzchak v'Yaakov Sarah Rivcha v'Leah v'Rachel v'Leah v'Im She'ar Tzadikim v'Tzidkat Kot Shebagan Eden v'Nomar Amen.
That's it, yeah.
Now wait. I'm going to read the English, so those that didn't follow the Hebrew. May God remember the soul of Edward Naklis, their teacher, and that of his, who has gone to his supernal world. Because I will, without obligating myself with a vow, donate charity for his sake. In this merit, may his soul be bound up in the bond of life with the souls of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, Sarah, Rebekah, Rachel, and Leah, righteous men and women who are in Gan Eden. And let us say, Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Joey.
Father, oh, this is for
Yeah, this is the nice one.
one of the children.
Yeah, yeah. All righty. I'm going to do a little poem next. This isn't one that my dad wrote. This is one that I wrote for him for his Father's Day a few years ago. And I'm going to probably roll that into a little bit of the eulogy. I'm going to kind of spatter the eulogy in a little bit here and there. In true Naklis fashion, I'm just going to wing it. Father's Day poem for my pop. You taught me to sail, to camp, and to ski. You taught me to appreciate nature, music, and poetry. You instilled in me values like respect for all, no matter their station in life, and how to be compassionate, empathetic, and take action against others' strife. You taught me to stand up for what's right and help those in need, and that putting myself on the line when required is a noble deed. The courage and honor, loyalty and patriotism are concepts to be carried in my soul. That the ideas of family and duty, love and joy, tenacity and truth are things that I must hold. That I should respect my elders and pay credit to the generations who have gone before. To strive for peace and not throw the first punch, but that some things are worth fighting for. That a good story bears repeating and occasionally embellished, and you should listen even if you know what's in store. That laughter is a great way to make strangers feel welcome, and that there's always room at the table for one more. That value and worth are so much more than the money a man can boast. and the good times spent with those you care about are what truly matter the most. How memories of those times that are precious gems and should be kept secure in the mind, to be taken out and examined, remembered and reminisced on, and stored back for another time. Times like standing on beaches, feet buried in surf and sand, trips camping in the trips camping in the mountains and sailing on the Chesapeake Bay. All-day motorcycle rides through the Maryland hills to stumble upon parties though we didn't know the way. And hundreds of memories of time spent together, absorbing what you taught as I grew from a boy to a man. Now it's my turn to teach my daughters, having as much fun on the way as we can. And so I conclude this one more thing you taught me to make poignant your special day. The toast of all toasts, the way they all ended, may you never have less than you have today. Love you, Pop. All right, hopefully that is the most broken up one. Joey? Joey's gonna lead us in Al-Melech next. And for anyone who's not aware, these are the prayers both that you kind of are supposed to say at something like this, and we also threw in one or two others that mattered for our family. So.
El male rachamim shochein bamromim hamtzei menucha nechonot al kanfei hashkinot bela'alot kedoshim utehorim kezohar harakia masirim et nishmat Sheholach leolamo began Eden tehei menuchato anu ba'aramim hastirei beseter kinafav leolamim utzror betzor chaim et nishmato aranahu nachalato v'yanuach al mishkavo b'shalom v'nomar amen.
If everybody wants to read along in the English together.
God, who is full of mercy and dwells on high, provide a true rest on the wings of the divine, presence among the holy and pure ones who shine as brightly as the brilliance of the sky, to the soul of Edward, who has gone on to their eternity. The Garden of Eden will be their resting place. We beseech the Merciful One to shade them forever with divine wings and to bind their soul up in the bonds of life. The Lord is their heritage, and they shall rest peacefully on her bed. And let us say, Amen.
Thanks, Joey. All right, we're going to bring Sarah up next, who's going to do another one of the poems.
Oh, yes.
All right.
So this also was originally Dad. He actually wrote, it's called The September You Went Away. He originally wrote it. He originally wrote it, it was the April You Went Away. And I think he wrote it for his sister, Aunt Ellie. So I just modified it for Dad. September is a month for change. The trees are tall and sway. Football cheers and school bells, the leaves grow prettier by the day. I look around the whole wide world to its joy and stress, and when I think that you're not here, in my heart is loneliness. I shed my tears and tore my heart this September that you went away. Though it has not been a lengthy time, I still think you'll be back one day. I try every day to remember my dad and to teach my children about the things that he taught me. And even though my kids are very young and didn't have quite the same relationship and closeness as my nieces had, as Miriam and Aaron's kids had. We were so lucky and so blessed with modern technology that even though Dad was in Florida and we were in Maryland and we're in the middle of COVID, we got to have Shabbat dinner and we got to see Dad and Miriam almost every week, if not more, through Zoom calls and, video chats. And definitely remember watching, Dad, showing Dad Raina as she was walking on her walker and saying, Dad, I think she would beat you in a race with the walker. And I hope he's proud of me, and I'm proud of Aaron and Miriam and the way we're all raising our kids. And we're so lucky that we had him for as long as we did. So, thank you, Dad. Love you.
All right, thank you, Sarah. We're going to do one more that I'm going to explain just a little bit for those of you who aren't Jewish. The Mourner's Kaddish is the next one. This is one that is said several times throughout several different services, but in particular, if you're mourning, it's traditional, I think, for the first year is to stand and say it along. And when I was younger, I remember, asking my dad in synagogue about it one time. And some people, my dad being one of them, and this sort of instilled it in me as well, even if they're not in mourning, they'll stand to embrace the other mourners, to show support for the people that are. So when I was in USY and even the times that we go to synagogue today, even if I'm not in mourning, is a lesson I learned from him is to stand up and to mourn with the people just so that they have somebody to support them. So in this one, whether if you're comfortable with it, if you want to stand and mourn with us, if everybody could please rise for the Mourner's Kaddish. And if you know the Hebrew, read it along. If you don't know it, it's going to be on the left-hand side just below the poem Sarah read. Yigadal v'yikadash shemei rabbah, v'lamer rab yirmach te, v'imhimar te, v'chaim aleinu v'akol Yisrael, v'imru amen. V'aglav zman hagarim v'imru amen. Yeshem mei rabbah min shemaya, v'chaim aleinu v'akol Yisrael, Midnasei, V'yatadar v'talel v'talal, Shemeda Kudusha Brachu, Amel Makro Shata, Tushbachata v'nachamata, Dayama Rav v'yirmu amen. Yehei Shlama Rabba ben Shemaya, V'achim aleinu v'yakol Yisrael v'yirmu amen. Oseh shalom b'mramav, Huya Oseh shalom, aleinu v'yakol Yisrael v'yirmu amen. Thank you. Today, aside from my dad, family, and everybody, we're recognizing one other special person. Uncle Henry passed away in 2020, and he unfortunately wasn't able to be given such a wonderful send-off because of COVID restrictions. So I wanted to bring Allie up here so that she and Adam and their whole family could recognize her father, Henry, in a way a couple years late, but I think that's appropriate considering it's his brother's day and her brother's got to share. So, Allie, if you want to come on up.
Okay, let's see if I can get through this. Okay, thanks. The stories and time with my dad fills my heart, but what stands out most as I've grown older is what he stood for, family and tradition. He taught me to always put my family first, to be there for people when they needed me most, and to ask for nothing in return. My father never complained. He found happiness in life's simple joys and always putting my mom's and our happiness above his own, especially my mom's. Dad had his incredible way of brightening my day just by walking into a room. I can still hear the sound of him coming home after a long day, making his signature joke, "You ate without me," delivered in a way only he could. He always had wintergreen certs in his pocket just for me and made sure to rile us up with his playful energy as soon as he walked through the door. Dinner time at our house was never just about the food. It was about the stories. My brother and I couldn't wait to hear the latest adventures of Uncle Eddie and my dad as kids. We'd hang on every word, laughing until our sides hurt. One of my favorites was the time Aunt Ellie locked Dad and Uncle Eddie in the attic. Typical of my dad, he came up with a grand plan, tying sheets together to make a makeshift rope. The plan was to send Eddie down first, of course. As Grandpa Arthur came home, the first thing he saw was Eddie dangling from the sheet halfway out the attic window. After dinners, Dad would often suggest we go visit his brother. My brother Adam and I would tag along, thrilled to see our cousins. Those walks were just about catching up. They were filled with laughter, stories, and little lessons in what it means to value family. Dad and Uncle Eddie were quite the pair. Total opposites in so many ways, but somehow that made their bond even stronger. They had their own secret language, quirky words, and inside jokes, and that only they could understand. They'd laugh and reminisce about their mischief they got into while sharing a room growing up. And you could see the joy in their faces. Their stories weren't just funny, they were a testament to the kind of unconditional love only siblings can share. No matter what life threw at them, they always had each other. And it's a lesson I'll carry with me forever. They showed me how much joy comes from those you hold close, and how family isn't just about being there in the good times. It's about creating memories that last a lifetime. Sundays were sacred in our family. We'd make their trips into Baltimore to see Grandma Kay and Grandpa Dave, and all my uncles and aunts and cousins. Those car rides were so special because my dad, he filled them with laughter, singing, and jokes, and turning an ordinary drive into treasured family times. Dad's love for politics was legendary, and he especially loved getting into good-natured debates with my pop-up over Truman and Roosevelt, passionately defending their views while respecting the other's opinion. I love listening to them go back and forth, their words full of fire, but their bonds unshaken. My father even shared his passion for politics with his grandchildren, taking them on a tour in the White House to pass down his appreciation for his history and tradition. At his core, Dad's life was about family and tradition, and he showed it to us through his actions and what it means to live for those you love and to find joy in bringing happiness to others. I love you, Dad.
All righty. Thank you very much, Ollie. I think this might be a good time for me to throw in a book one of my eulogy. So, just like my dad, I tend to be a little verbose. I talk a lot, and I tend to ramble with the stories that hopefully are interesting, but I'm going to try to split this one up a little bit. But before I do get into my dad and mom and family, there's two people I'd like to take a second to recognize that are here today and thank them for what they have done so much over the years for my dad. Miriam, you were there to support both Mom and Dad in person in ways that Sarah and I never could do. You lived blocks from them at some point, sometimes with them over the years. And I know that from my perspective, from Emily's perspective, having you there to be able to be with him and Mom as well, it meant the world to all of us, and we really thank you for it. It was huge. And on a very personal note, I would like to thank my wife, Emily, for all of her unflappable support over the years in making sure that I was able to care for my parents in the appropriate ways. And thanks, babe. You're the best. Okay, on to Dad. He was my dad. He was Eddie Spaghetti, Pop, Mom's husband, a brother, a crazy uncle. Adam, where are you at? Uncle Earring, is that what you used to call him? Crazy Uncle Earring. He was a captain and a friend to many others. Native to Washington, D.C., he was the Passover Seder ringleader and the guy who had a guy for that. The Toastmaster, philosopher, and a true artist at creating thought-provoking and stimulating conversations, even if you didn't want to have them. He loved spending time with his family, especially his grandchildren, and he was considered an adoptive father to so many of our friends. He and Mom would always find room for one more at the table, and their home was open for as little or as long as someone needed. As a sailor, biker, camper, music fan, and overall staunch supporter and lover of life, he brought me and so many other people in this room along on his adventures. As a poet, he would put those adventures to words, along with dozens of other moments that he would dedicate to style and verse. And along the way, he instilled in me both the same sense of adventure and the desire to recognize and transcribe those adventures as they happened. I know that he's been thrilled to see that I've been doing my best to pass that same outlook along to both of my children, and anyone who crosses my path. And aside from just sharing those adventures with so many of us, he would also bring on all sorts of wonderful, unexpected things into your life, as only he could. As an accountant, when a client was finding it hard to pay, he would always be able to work something out. That's how we ended up with a hot air balloon when we were kids. It's how we got one of our boats. It's how he acquired for me my first motorcycle, my first truck, and my first sailboat. But true to Eddie's style, he literally put the cart before the horse as the truck showed up 6 weeks after the boat and trailer did. Still, he could horse trade with the best of them, and nothing would really compare to his client who owned a movie theater and would make copies of new releases before they were even shown. That was the reason our whole neighborhood was it was the whole reason that our neighborhood knew that Vader was Luke's father long before Empire was released. He was a fellow traveler and a past master of his Masonic Lodge, a sort of hippie and a vivacious reader who exemplified the term jack of all trades, mostly because he was able to BS his way through just about anything. In short, my dad was a Renaissance man mixed with a pirate, mixed with the most interesting man in the world, with just a pinch of Danny DeVito in just for the crazy. But above all, Dad was a humanist. He saw the value in just about everyone who crossed his path and tried to show them the value that he saw in them. He had an almost infectious way of making you take steps that you might not otherwise do and leap across lines you might otherwise stay on the cautious side of. Partially, it was just for the fun of it. But for a larger part, it was because he was just so incredibly encouraging. He would give advice, solicited or not, on how you could achieve any goal you had in mind, no matter how big or how small. He would just encourage you to believe not just in yourself, but in his unwavering support for you. When he said, "You got this," or "I'll help you," it never felt like lip service. He truly believed in the power that was inside you and threw that support behind your aspirations. As most of you know, Emily and I spent the better part of the last few decades living in New Orleans. And while we're in Phoenix now, those NOLA traditions die pretty hard, and the customs take hold. Down there we have a tradition called the second line. When someone dies, the first line of the funeral procession is somber and what you would expect. the family slowly walking as they followed the hearse with the band playing a dirge. But after that comes the second line. The sadness is still there, but the somberness is replaced with something more boisterous as the second line band plays upbeat songs that were enjoyed by the departed, with everyone waving handkerchiefs and dancing to the music. The second line is a celebration of the person's life. It's an expression of the joy at having known them, and in a uniquely New Orleans, but without losing the perspective of loss. During their visits to us over the years in New Orleans, my parents witnessed several second lines as they would roll by. Mom would clap along, and Dad would do his weird chicken wing dance, and they would just both enjoy the moment as it whooshed past us. I think for both of them, it went along with so much that I learned from them. For my mom to enjoy the positive memories no matter how tough things could be, and let the reminiscence and revelry bring a smile to your face. For my dad, never pass up on the opportunity to celebrate and party, even in the sorrowful times. Because if there was one thing he was absolutely extraordinary at doing, it was pushing off the negative to focus on the positive. And somehow, no matter how frustrating or even irresponsible it may have seemed, he could get you to go along with it. In a way to honor that, I spent the last few days driving all around DC and Maryland, scattering his ashes in dozens of places, which he created positive memories for me, and I'm sure for many memories for you as well. I'm going to touch on those in book 2. If we could turn to the next page, we're going to do prayers for the healing. Joey, if you want to come on up again. And in this one, a little explanation, just what you would expect. It's prayers for people that are currently trying to recover from sickness, injury, whether it's emotional, mental, physical. And I encourage anyone to say a name. I'm going to start with our cousin Harry, who had a heart attack recently, and he's recovering. And I want to thank Amy for being there with him and making sure he gets better, as his older sister. So.
Yeah, I know. We're on the next to the last page, a page with a picture of all the men on it. Mishaberach avotenu mikor habracha leamotenu. Mishaberach imotenu mikor habracha laavotenu. Bless those in need of healing with refuah shalema, the renewal of body, the renewal of spirit, and let us say, Amen.
Amen. Thanks, Joey. I'm going to grab that one. I'm going to give you that one.
Right.
All right, thanks. Oh, not quite there yet.
Not going to do it. Okay.
Let me trade it. That's got my notes in it.
Okay.
Thanks. All right, thanks again, Joey. All right, next up, we're going to have Aunt Leonore come on up and give a few remembrances of what it was like when the Nachlass Max family merged. But before I do, I have a little something that she and I were talking the other day, and kind of occurred to me the different ways that their generation and that our generation saw the Nachlass Max, Max amalgamation. For those that you don't know, my father's father died when he was younger. I think he was 17, and he married 15. I'm sorry, 15. She ended up his mother ended up marrying Aunt Leonore's father, David Max, and that created this Max clan that we call it. And it really occurred to me in our conversation that your generation saw it as Nachlass Max joining. My generation never knew that. We only knew it as the Max, and we only knew it as the Max, which was Grandpa Dave. And I think that what really hit me was how powerful that can be when families merge and it hits that next generation to where there was never any separate family, it was always together. That said, I'm surprised it ended up as Nacko Max. It should have been Max Knackless, and here's why. And I think that Aunt Lynn or Uncle Nelson and Uncle Eddie might agree that the Knackless side has a way of, to put it a little politely, overshadowing anyone else in their orbit. But how do you overshadow 3 people who have like 13 doctorates among you? Seriously, a scientist, a pediatrician, and honestly, I don't even know what Uncle Nelson does. He was a front runner for computer graphics. He was a mountain climber. And if anyone was at Allie and Jeff's wedding, you remember he was just one hell of a dancer. At some point, I think I just decided he was some kind of badass spy, and that was it. But that's kind of the point, though, is that with a pedigree like you guys, how did you not just take over this family and just run with it? It amazes me. I guess that's just the power of the Knackless attitude. Aunt Luna, if you'd like to come up and talk about that little merging, would be wonderful.
So I don't want to ramble, but I do want to say, when Aaron asked me to say something about Eddie and also about Henry, I have great memories of Henry. When Kay in Washington married my father in Baltimore, who was a friend of Arthur's in high school, I don't know if people knew that, they had 7 children, from Eleanor, the oldest, to Leonore, the youngest, and we had 2 Eddies, and they were the closest in age. It led to some confusion when friends called. Edwin Sunnyhill Knackless had been baby Eddie in his, for many years. But he was older than Eddie Max. Eddie Max was taller, but Eddie Knackless was wider. And you couldn't really call him Big Eddie and Little Eddie, you know. So I remember people calling and saying, "Can I speak to Eddie?" and answering, "Eddie who?" and having them get all embarrassed and figure that they'd dialed the wrong number and hang up. And the most obvious would have been his or hers. But you'd have to know the fact. If you knew the family enough to know that, you knew who they were talking about. Ellie and Larry were already married with kids. Henry and Eddie moved into the Nacko Max house, which we didn't call that. We called the incredible sandcastles Nacko Max Manor. Eddie and Henry lived in 5600 for a while, but Henry soon married the girl of his dreams. When we were going through the house, we found a junior high school textbook with a heart with an arrow through it saying Barbara and Henry. The only people I know who married their sweetheart from junior high school. Their love was just steadfast and enjoyment. I remember sitting in a drive-in theater, which existed at that point, and listening to them sing along, and sometimes sing on the way there and on the way back with such enjoyment. Eddie, well, one more thing about Henry, I guess. He was so nice. He was just a lovely person. And being a cynical teenager, I sort of felt a falseness. And I remembered that at somebody's celebration of something when I was talking to Henry, and I realized he's totally sincere. He really is that loving and that nice. Now, Eddie wasn't shy. He did what needed to be done, and I remember when my father was buried, and the rabbi, this was after the funeral, the rabbi hadn't made it to the graveside. So we all stood around for a little while, and then Eddie did the service. I was so impressed. I still am. He was full of ideas, and he was full of talk and talk and talk, and sometimes it was hard to stop. And he never stopped being creative, and some of the ideas were wonderful, and I never would have thought of them. And some of them, I giggle at now, like once when my sons and he and I were in the backyard, and Celia was in the house, and for some reason he wanted to tamp down a stick. So he looked and grabbed a really heavy glass ashtray and started hammering with predictable results. And we had, so nobody would get hurt, we went inside. They celebrated with knucklemaxes, Thanksgiving, Hanukkah. My father was a Hanukkah man. Passover, and I will never forget the interminable telling of this story going around the table when we were at Eddie's after my father had died. And I particularly remember when Adam was a teenager, and the story of Potiphar's wife was his portion, and he was glad to have it. I mean, he just really was his teenage self as his grown-up self. That doesn't make any memories, I guess, but mine. Sorry. And after the Seder, Aunt Paula and Uncle Bernie and their crew would come over, and we would dance the Miserlou forever with Eddie Mack's drumming on the Encyclopedia Britannica. Actually, Paula and Bernie had introduced them when they became widow and widower. They invited them both to a party, and lots of other people, of course. And I remember my father saying when he left, he noticed that some of the women had put their telephone numbers and names in his pocket. I guess, he was an eligible widower. But he said Kay didn't do that, but she was certainly the only one he had any interest in. And the rest is history, Knucklemax history. So many memories about Eddie, but I won't go on and on. I'll just say, Fourth of July was a real gathering of knucklemaxes and necklaces and necklaces. Arthur had been the youngest, but one of 12. And his father had started this tradition of picnics on July 4th. And it kept going. And as the older generation stopped being able to participate in life, it still went on. And I was just old enough to be at Jesse's farm once. And then, like many teenagers, I didn't want to come anymore. And like many young adults, I came back and with my children. And so it continued. And Irva amazingly kept going for years and years and years. And it stopped by COVID. I still treasure the Knucklemax family. It was a natural in some ways. Each of them treasured many cousins. We all had many uncles and cousins and aunts that numbered, uncles and cousins who numbered by the dozens and aunts, to quote Gilbert Sullivan. Anyway, that's all I have to say. He led a wonderful life, and we all benefited. He led a joyous life and brought joy to us all.
Thank you so much, Aunt Leonore. like to take a second and tell a couple little stories here about family members, and I'm going to start with Aunt Leonore, because Aunt Leonore did the coolest thing that I ever remember happening, and I know I just saw the look on Allie's face, and she knows that anyone was around for any of our Passover Seders at our house, as long as the dinner went off without a food fight, we would end, which happened a couple times, as everybody was sort of just hanging out towards the end, waiting for dessert, Aunt Leonore, professor of music, correct? Doctorate in music? Oh, yeah, there you go. So she would line up all these water glasses, and she would tune them like a piano. Wine glasses, well, some were water, some were wine. I remember one year, and only one year, they gave me a pitcher and a wooden spoon to be like the gong, and I abruptly broke it. So the gong stayed out later. But she would tune all these glasses, and then she would sit on one side of this long table. I mean, we would have probably 50 people in this table that would go down and around the corner of this huge room that we had. And she would sit on the opposite side, and she would point to you. And when she pointed to you like a conductor, whatever yours was, she would play Pachelbel Canon. She would play also Mozart. It was so cool. It was one of the neatest things that I ever remembered seeing. And there's a photo of you in that slideshow tuning the glasses. So I really hope you guys all see it and get such a great memory that I do out of it. I would like to take a minute and talk about Uncle Henry. I have great stories about Uncle Henry and Aunt Barbara and wonderful memories about both of them. I think one of my favorite of Aunt Barbara was when I was holding David as a baby, and she said to me, "He's the cutest knackless baby since you." I don't know why that hit me so wonderfully that Aunt Barbara thought I was the cutest baby of our generation. So, you know, sorry, Adam. But my favorite memory of Uncle Henry he wasn't even there. I was hanging out at Indian Springs because I think I had a swim meet or whatever it was, and I was at the Indian Springs pool. And a friend of mine was sort of introducing me to some people, and this one older lady and her friend were like, "You look really familiar." I would think I was 17 at the time. And I said, "Well, I don't know, my name is Aaron Nacklis. Do you know my dad, Eddie?" She said, "No, but I knew his brother." And I said, "What, Larry or Henry?" She goes, "Henry." And then the woman next to her goes, "Henry Nacklis." It was so cool, and I couldn't wait to tell him when I saw him. But I had one other really great moment with the two of them, and I think you were there. You were there, maybe Adam was there, but it was visiting them at their place over in Leisure World. And I used to be in the Coast Guard, if you weren't aware, and big part of my job was I was a mechanic on helicopters. I would fix them on the ground, and I would fly in them when they were in the air. And we were talking about there was this wonderful old grandfather clock that used to be in the house on Green Spring Avenue, and that it migrated over to Uncle Henry and Aunt Barbara's place, and it hadn't worked in a while. And I said, "Well, you know, I'm a mechanic. This is just a basic hoist system. Let me see if I could figure it out." And I believe it was right after somebody was diagnosed with something. I couldn't remember what at the time. But there was some question of the outcome and how long people were going to last afterwards, as there always is. And during this conversation that we were having about that, I fixed the clock. And I got this grandfather, I popped open the face of it, I tinkered around with some of the gears inside, I saw something that slipped out, probably in the move. And I kind of pop things back into place. And mind you, I am in no way at all a trained clock repairman. Clocks, watches, anything. But I managed to fix this clock. And I got it wound up, and I got the pendulum swinging, and it was working again. And there was this little moment that I talked with Aunt Barbara about, how when that clock started working again, it felt like the prognosis didn't matter. Something was going to work out all right. And I think that that's something you felt as well, Allie, when that clock started swinging and we saw life is back into it. So that was one of my favorites. Okay. So we're going to move on next to Misha Beira. I'm sorry, we just did that. I did have a poem in here called Naming Day that I encourage you to read on your own. You know what? I'll read it really quick, unless somebody else wants to come up and do it. All right. This was a poem that my dad wrote for the grandchildren, and every grandchild that would roll around, he would change a verse or two to kind of clean it up, but this was the joy in my father and in my mother's life, was seeing their grandchildren and being able to have a relationship with them. And it's a shame that Mom didn't have the relationship with yours the way she did with ours, but I know that your kids and Dad had something very tight as well. So, Naming Day. In our hearts, a special place for memories we hold dear. We are about to add another, for Naming Day is here. For 3,500 years, the chain begot of Abraham and Sarah remains unbroken through the years. The word of God and Torah is still reverberating in our minds and ears. At Sinai, when we were few, we made a covenant and pledged our children. We are keeping that pledge today, giving the Hebrew name as the mark of a Jew. To the child we thought we'd never have, an expression of our love, a most precious jewel whose face reflects the light from God above. As generations gather, those here and those above, the future and past together as families, religious traditions are passed along the way, my grandchild gets their Hebrew name today. Our wish for you is beauty, health, and happiness, and the light of God each and every day. May you and your family never have less love, joy, and happiness and pleasure than you have today. Love, Grandpa Eddie. All right. I'm gonna do Lador Vador. Joey, if you want to just lead us from your seat, or Sarah, you know what, Sarah, why don't you come on up, lead us in the last two. Go ahead and do Lador Vador and then take a little break. You're on. However you choose.
So I usually, when I know these songs, I know them like as songs, so if I'll sing them if you don't mind, and if you guys join along, that would be great. So, Le dor vador, le dor vador, le dor vador nagi gad lecha, le dor vador, le dor vador, le dor vador nagi gad lecha. ולנצח נצחים כרשעתך נקדיש, כרשעתך נקדיש. לשמך אלוהינו מפינו לא ימוש, לא ימוש לעולם ועד. לדור ודור, לדור ודור, לדור ודור נגיד עד לך. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu v'Elahei HaKadosh. To all generations will make known your greatness, and to all eternity proclaim your holiness. Your praise, O God, shall never depart from our lips. Dad was, as Aaron pointed out, is all about passing the joy and the love from one generation to the next. And Similarly, always praying for peace. So, we're doing the peace one, yeah? Okay.
All right, so in book one, everybody heard that I drove all around Baltimore, Maryland. And I wanted to touch on that a little bit because the places that I stopped, I know mean a lot to a lot of the other people in this room, so I just kind of wanted to pop onto them. And I sent a few photos along that I think really kind of hit for you as much as it did for me. But as I was driving around, I went from the houses on Greenspring Avenue, which was where Aunt Leonore was talking about when Grandpa Dave and Grandma Kay just had these wonderful Passover Seders and Hanukkah. Remembering Grandpa Dave, tall, imposing almost, sitting up in front of this blue, weird fireplace thing, but he was doling out the gifts to all of us. That is a great memory. Down to just before today, Emily was kind enough to drive me all around to some places in Silver Spring, to the house that I grew up in. And the other day I went around to Baltimore and Annapolis Harbor, and yesterday I was down at the National Mall with one of my best friends, Larissa. But through all that, I kind of took my dad on a final tour of the DMV, DC, Maryland, and Virginia area, scattering his ashes on the way that, in places that really held memories, not just for me, but ones that I knew held memories for him as well. These are some of the places that we visited, and next time you're in the area, you pass by, I really hope that you think about my dad and maybe a good memory that you have of him in some of those places. Started out in Baltimore, but while I was in Baltimore, I came across this amazing quote, and I normally don't like to quote people other than my dad or maybe myself, but this one, it was just absolutely perfect, not only for my father's outlook on life, but for today as well. This was from the captain's log of the captain of the Pride of Baltimore I, which sank May 7th, 1986, and this was the log entry from 7 days prior. And I think it's very appropriate for today. What lies ahead is unknown, a source of mystery and apprehension. Perhaps it's the allure of sailing life, always moving, always changing, always wonder what the next passage will be like and what we'll discover at the other end. This time, our destination is home, the Chesapeake Bay and Baltimore. So Dad and I started the day off with this beautiful sunrise down in Fells Point from the docks of Henderson Wharf, which is where he and I ran a sailboat chartering company together. We went over to Fort McHenry, and I sprinkled some of his ashes, which may not be exactly legal, so please don't say anything. But I sprinkled some of his ashes at the fort overlooking the bay, and completely appropriate, I was looking out at the bridge, which, as we all know, had the collapse not long ago, and seeing this span where they're just missing in the middle, it kind of hit me a little bit of my dad missing from my life. It's still a great thing, but something is clearly not there. We went over to Federal Hill, and in the shadow of the American flag, I sprinkled some of his ashes where he can overlook the USS Constellation, the Science Center, the Pride of Baltimore Memorial, and all the sailing traffic at the Turning Basin, as well as the concerts at Pier 6 and the Ravens football games, things that he and I had done all together. And then I took a dog leg up past Greenspring Avenue, where as children we would celebrate with Grandma Kay, Grandpa Dave, and the rest of the huge Nacomax clan. Shot down to Annapolis, and we got some steamers and crabs at Cantler's. Walked next door to our favorite dock where we used to go sailing out of for years. Rolled down to the city docks in Ego Alley, Spa Creek, Back Creek, and Jabin Shipyard, where he taught me how to be a professional sailor before I joined the Coast Guard, and where I followed in his footsteps and got my captain's license. We came down into DC, went to the Taft Bridge, which is the bridge on Connecticut Avenue that has the big lions on it, where as a kid he used to tell me that his father Arthur and his siblings Eleanor, Larry, and Henry would all pick him up so he could pet the lions' tails when they would walk down it. So I remember once or twice as he and I were driving around, I pulled the car over so he could get up there and do it himself. And it was pretty cool. Then yesterday with Emily and with Larissa, we went all around the National Mall from the hill we would watch the 4th of July fireworks from, down to the tidal basin, down to the pool in front of the Capitol where he could keep a good eye on all the politicians that are trying to make this country the greatest place that he thought it was. He used to also have a saying, or not a saying, but he would say, you know, when I die, just flush me down the drain and I'll eventually scatter and end up everywhere. Well, I didn't do that, obviously, but I did sprinkle just a little bit in the sink in the Natural History Museum, right between the blue whale and the elephant. And I think that so request granted on that one, Pop. And again, just this morning, we went past the old Shaare Tefila site on Lockwood, past our house in Three Meadows, and I even cut through a couple of houses so I could sprinkle some on the tree that he taught me to climb when I was a kid. We went to the location of the Long Gone Tack Room, which is a breakfast joint that he would take us to for, is a tradition that I carry on with my kids, where if there's ever an appointment in the morning and you're gonna show up late for school, he would always take us there and just say, don't tell your mom or teachers. We had a family meeting here. And he'd take us for breakfast. Over to Robin Hood Swim Club, where he taught us how to swim, dive, and play. And then we went over to Westover Elementary for the family picnic, or for the big elementary school picnics, and the site of the hot air balloon birthday party from when I was 10 years old. And after this, I'm going to swing over to my mom's grave. And I would encourage everyone, just for a second, to take a minute and think of one of these places that maybe, Isabel, you remember with my dad cruising up and down the bay, or the 4th of July picnic servo, or any of those moments that my dad and mom may have made just a little bit better by being there for you. And after this, I'd really love to hear what those memories are. We're going to have a nosh and a bagel and maybe an embellished story or two right behind this as we go through the doors. And hopefully we can all share a smile for my mom and a laugh for my dad afterwards. Sarah, if you want to knock out the blessing for peace.
So Mom and Dad, I know the blessing for peace isn't necessarily traditional for this kind of thing, but Mom and Dad and Uncle Henry, they would want us to pray for peace, especially given the state of the world. So I'm going to sing this one again. Shalom Rav Yisrael Amcha Tasim Le'olam. Shalom Rav Yisrael Amcha Tasim Le'olam. Ki atahu melech adon L'chol HaShalom. Ki atahu melech adon L'chol HaShalom. Shalom Rav Yisrael Amcha Tasim Le'olam. V'tov enecha levarech et Amcha Yisrael b'chol עת ובכל שעה בשלומך. Shalom Rav Yisrael Amcha Tasim Le'olam. Shalom Rav Yisrael Amcha Tasim Le'olam. Baruch atah Adonai Oseh Shalom.
Thank you, everybody. Bagels and coffee are served.